Nick Moses 05 Gaming Podcast. I am here with Josh Foreman, senior, level designer of Mythical Games. Josh, how are you doing today?
Doing great. I'm considering maybe asking for a new position as senior level designer.
You know what? That might be something. You might need to ask for that. It might, include some other stuff. But no, I appreciate it. And I'm a little nervous, Josh. You got me nervous, man. I don't do, this project is pretty big. I've seen the segment on E3 and the vision that it seems like you guys have. And besides the NFT side of things, the vision, and I've actually played it, the level design. Let me ask you, how challenging was it for the level design in Blankos? Was this a challenging thing to do, or was it something pretty simple that you probably already had in mind?
Well, I guess there's a lot of different ways to answer that. It's very challenging project in that it's the first time that I've ever worked on anything. It's kind of the first time in the industry where we're trying to combine several different factors here. So you've got the blockchain, kind of foundation that's supposed to drive that end of things, the economy end of things. So that's complicated. Then you also have sort of an action-oriented multiplayer game, which that's one of the most complicated kind of games you can try to make. And then on top of that, we're also trying to do user-generated content, which is another very complicated thing. So it's not that we're not up to it, but it is something that requires a lot of focus and dedication and iteration. Fortunately, the team that we've assembled is very senior, a lot of people with a lot of experience. Most of us have 20 plus years in the industry. So we've been through the ringer quite a few times, and I think we're all kind of up to the task.
Nice. You mentioned specifically user created content. Since you mentioned it, I noticed there's a level editor. With the level editor, is that something that's pretty quick to grasp if you get into, which you could take about 30 minutes maybe to have an understanding, and then maybe a couple hours to get an advanced understanding? Or is this something you're really gonna just have to just take the time to understand to really get into it? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it is specifically my job to make sure that it is as easy as possible to get into. So the degree to which I've succeeded, me and my team have succeeded on this task, it remains to be seen. It's one of those things that requires iteration, requires getting it out there and getting a lot of feedback and actioning on that feedback. Here's the way I look at it, is that there is a spectrum of level editors that exist in the universe. So on one end, you have like Unreal 5 or Unity, where everything is as complicated as possible because it needs to accommodate every possible design goal you could imagine, right? And so you're going to have to do scripting and coding and create all your own textures and build all your own models. So that's one end of the spectrum. Now imagine on the other end, there's something like Mario Maker, which is where you just literally drag a tile onto the screen and it just pops into place on a grid, right? So imagine those two ends of the spectrum. And we're trying to hit closer to the Mario Maker end in the sense that we want people to feel like they're building with a box of Legos, like they just have all these blocks and they could do amazing creative things with them, but it's not up to them to hand author the individual blocks or make the textures or script the gameplay. Even on the gameplay front, we're trying to imagine it like blocks, to have interactive objects like guns or race checkpoints, vibes that you can collect, these kind of things. And you just put them in the level and they just work. You don't have to do scripting at all. So you set the win conditions. So you could set up a race right now just by putting race checkpoints in, and you go in and you say, I want this to be a race. You just click a box. But then you also put guns in. That's just gonna work. Now you can shoot at the other players while you're racing, and it's a super fun, light activity. Now it is complicated by the fact that it is 3D. So unlike a Mario Maker kind of game or the Little Big Planet games, where it's just kind of back and forth on the screen on one flat area, we have to accommodate for being able to build in every direction. And so we've come up with a variety of techniques to simplify it, but also allow it to be flexible. So we have different ways of snapping things together. A lot of games that let you build, bases and forts in them, they're very limited to, there's one way you could snap things together, for instance. Well, we weren't satisfied with that, so we gave you the ability to snap like that, but we also gave you the ability to go off the grid and get really arbitrary with whatever rotation you want. We have the ability to scale props within certain constraints. So again, we're trying to hit that like very simple, easy to understand without adding super complicated stuff, but still giving you the flexibility to be as creative as possible. So it's a difficult line to walk, but I think we've had a lot of success just in seeing how amazing and creative games that the builder community has come up with. So that's been really exciting to see that happen.
Oh, now I've got the right man here. I just feel like you're just you're just nailing these questions perfectly. So with that, I have a daughter, and she's 5 years old. Immediately when I cut this on, and I stayed through the entire E3 reveal, and we got our Twitch drop, and we're on there, and I knew it. She was gonna love it from the moment it came. I want to try, and she loves it. With the level editor, is this something that I'm not sure if you guys tested with an age variety, but do you see more? Can there be handled by kids, so this level editor, or is this something that you might want to teach first and then maybe they can handle it?
Yeah, so our goal is to make it as broadly accessible as possible. Again, within the constraints, you have to be able to use it on a controller. It's in 3D space. So it really just depends on the natural abilities of the person who's coming at it. I do think with a 5-year-old, probably a little hands-on help at the beginning would be great. But I do want to say we have featured levels that have been made by the children of employees. I don't know if any of them have been 5, but I want to say one was 6 or 7. And they're just fun. It's sort of like being able to color outside of the lines and just pile up blocks and shapes and interactives wherever you want. And because the way the system works just accommodates it, it's really an exciting thing. You've seen incredible things from Minecraft and Roblox and all these other games out there that kids have created. So there is absolutely no reason why little ones could not totally get into the Blinko's building system. And I'd love to see what she makes.
Yeah. Oh, she will. I would definitely let you know. As far as when you're in the level editor, is this something that, is quick where you can go in and out as far as put something down and go right in and test it right away? Or is it something where you're coming back out and kind of going back into it to test it?
No, it's just a click of a button. That was
Nice.
very important to us. One thing that I've learned throughout my career is that level design improves every time you test it. So we had to have a very fast iteration cycle. So by iteration cycle, I mean, let's say you've made a gap that you want to jump over. And so you move your 2 blocks and you jump, and it's very easy. So you just pop back into edit mode, which is essentially you're floating around on a balloon, and you grab that block and you scooch it a little bit, and then a button press, and you're back running back and forth, and you jump.
Nice.
And so each of those is an iteration loop. And so you can really fine tune things very quickly in the editor. That's one of the things I'm really proud of.
So let me ask you, now, I always say I like to lay back questions. What is the weirdest bug that you've run into during level editing? I'm sure you've run into some weird bug that you just probably said, hey, everybody, come on over and take a look what I have just done. What bug would you say you have seen?
Usually it's the animation bugs that stick out as just a funny experience where, your head will float off your body, or your arms and legs will stretch and get really long, that sort of thing. It's not directly related to the level editor, but the level editor, because we wanted it to feel like you're actually like a toy floating around in the environment. It's not a very abstract working application like a 3D Studio Max or Maya or something like that, right? We want it to feel like it's building with toys. So we have your little character always on the screen floating around doing these things. And so they have to do a lot of very unique motions. You know, one of the things we have for when you create a block, when you bring something in from your library, your character sprays with a little spray can, and that's what creates the block in the level. And so yeah, there have been interesting bugs where just the animation glitches out and it looks hilarious.
And I always ask that because I just hear funny stories when I ask about the bugs. So Josh, one thing I haven't asked is about you. Josh, how did you get here? What is kind of your story? How does someone become a Josh Foreman? How?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's funny because it's so hard to answer in an industry that's constantly evolving, because if people come to me asking for advice, the advice that I give now, for instance, I have a son who's 21, and he was asking, you know, at one point he was interested in getting into the game industry, and the answer I gave him is very different than what I was doing in the mid 90s, because back then, you know, studios were a handful of people and there were no video game schools. There was no YouTube learning. There was nothing out there to really educate yourself on, you know, the best practices for the industry. So things were it was the Wild West when I started. I went to the Art Institute of Seattle, and so I started on an art track, and I was very interested. Originally, I wanted to make animatronics for movies, you know, like Jurassic Park dinosaurs and stuff like that. But once I realized I could make video games for a living, you know, when I was a kid growing up in the 80s, video games were made in Japan. They were just imports. And so it was never an option that I considered until I was in college. And once I got that bug, I was like, ooh, this is what I've got to do, because creating virtual environments and exploring 3D space is just something I'm super excited and passionate about. And so, yeah, I've been working on the art and level design and kind of where those two fields intersect for the past 25 years. And working on Blankos has just been an amazing opportunity to bring, you know, all that experience and try to infuse that into our whole community, our building community, to make, you know, it's kind of like propagating all the wisdom that is built up over the years to all these other beginners. You know, most of our building community is pretty young. And so seeing them taking on these best practices that I've learned the hard way throughout many years, just picking those up in a matter of days or weeks or months, it's very exciting. So yeah, it's definitely been a career highlight for me.
Nice. Something I covered that was mentioned was the artwork. And these artists, they're just like left and right, you know, we don't know. And I did see Burberry. Oh, I can't imagine how much that's going to cost, but, you know, talk to my daughter later about that. With these artists, I have not heard anything about is this something where up and coming artists as well, or anyone can get in there and design? Or is this something where, you know, not anyone can design? It's only artwork that you're buying directly from these artists, just so I get a clear understanding of it.
Yeah, so from, again, my understanding, and this probably differs depending on who you talk to at the company, but I think the basic strategy that we're going with is we're trying to find really well-known artists in the vinyl toy industry specifically to begin with. And we get our foot in, right? And we have like that recognition factor of like, ooh, this is the latest output from this artist I've been following for years that's been making vinyl toys, but here's the virtual version of it. And so it has a lot of intrinsic worth attached to that name and that brand that they have. So it's a lot of that kind of cross promotion thing happening right now. Yeah. I do see in the future that we're going to start developing just new voices in that space, because we're taking it into a new market, right? Vinyl toys is a physical thing that you buy physical versions of these like collector's items. But now that we're moving into this virtual space, there's always going to be room for new people to kind of come up in that space and make a name for themselves. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll be doing that in the future.
Okay, no, that's good to hear. What is the most difficult thing you had while doing the level designer? What is the most difficult challenge you found? I know you mentioned trying to find that middle ground, right? You know, was that the most difficult thing, or was there something specific that you said, hey, this was kind of difficult to fine tune, or just took a lot of time to work on?
Yeah, I guess there's two answers to that. Our primary challenges are making I guess two of them kind of blend together. So one is that we want this to be on any platform that we want to put it on, right?
Big one.
Nothing has been announced, but just
Mhm.
that's just a general understanding
That's
in
a
the
big one.
industry. Whenever you're making a new game, you want to keep it flexible
Right.
as concerning the platform. So we wanted to make sure that the build mode could be done on a controller, and a controller has far fewer buttons than a keyboard and mouse. And so
Yes.
that was a huge challenge. But at the same time, that offered an opportunity to make sure that the building mode was as intuitive and simple as possible, given the constraints of being in a 3D environment. So
Mhm.
it was kind of those two things at the same time, pushing us into the kind of space that we occupy right now, which I think is a niche that no one
Yes.
else is in as far as user generated content. So that's really exciting to be in that space and kind of pioneering that area. The other challenging thing is because we don't want people to feel like they need to do scripting or programming. We need to make sure that all the interactive stuff that we create just works out of the box and is very intuitive and can be combined in creative ways
Mhm.
without breaking or making, on the one hand, you need to give people the freedom to be able to make stuff that's not fun and that's
Yeah.
ridiculous and broken, right? On the other hand, you want to do as little of that as possible. Like if you can just throw paint at the wall and end up with a beautiful painting, why would you not do that, right? So we're trying to push as much of that intuitive, just play with things, experiment with things, and what we found is that people are very pleasantly surprised that just randomly throwing stuff against the wall, it's surprising how much stuff sticks. So
All right, and this is the last one before I go. After watching the E3, what is the biggest thing that you've heard as far as feedback? And this is just strictly for you dealing with the level design. What is some of the feedback you've heard after the keynote and after everything was shown? Was there something specific that you heard like, hey, the level design looks great. I think that's the best, or it scales for all ages. What was something that you heard that was just the biggest thing after E3?
boy, I think the building aspect of it was so overshadowed by celebrity and big giant name brand appearances. I have a little community that I work with of what I designate the hit makers, who are making consistently creating really creative and fun levels, and I've been working with them for a couple months now. And so it's just kind of been eyes on the ball this whole time, just like how can we make the most compelling and really importantly inspirational level, so when people get in the game and play, they're having a constant experience of, oh wow, who would have thought that I could be in this kind of environment doing this kind of thing. That's so exciting. So it's one of those things where E3 honestly hasn't affected that much. We've just been so focused on making just really compelling content. So
Yeah, and you know what? I seen it. I have tried a lot of those levels. I'm gonna tell you personally, I love them. My daughter, 5 years old, will create something. I will just send you, quick, little something of what she does, just so you see. But Josh, I really, really appreciate the time. I will say kudos, sir. I am looking forward to more work, and I will get into the level editor myself. I think you're right, scaling it perfectly between, you don't want it too much like Mario Maker. You do kind of want to let people, do a little more, but you're right. And my daughter's going to pick that up, and I'm thinking she's going to have a good time. So, Josh, is there any last words you would like to say before you're out?
just that I sincerely look forward to seeing what you and your daughter make. Please do follow up with that, because that is my pride and joy, is that build system. And I want to hear your feedback too. If you're frustrated or confused by anything, please let me know, because we've got a long list of features that we still have yet to implement. And we want to know where people's pain points are. That's kind of the industry lingo for, you're playing the game and at some point you get frustrated with something and you either want to put it down or you switch to something else. Tell me where that happens, because I want to make it better.
Nice, Josh. You're going to hear it. I appreciate your time, Josh. You have a great day.
All right, you too, Nick. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.